I'm Daniel Hubland, president of the Beacon Hill Area Neighborhood Association. Thank you all for coming out today. I was really uncertain what kind of response we'd get. I thought it could be 5 or it could be 100. I thought we were pushing closer to the latter, so I appreciate that. On a beautiful day. Thanks for coming out. I would like to thank San Antonio Police Chief William McManus and Councilman Mario Bravo, Councilman for District 1, for joining us today so we can talk about these matters. I'd also like to give some attention to our safe officer, Benito Maciel, and Anissa Shell, who is our liaison with District 1. And put them on the spot a little bit too, while I have the bosses here, they have done an excellent job for our neighborhood, so I really want to recognize that and thank them and you. Okay, out of the way. Why are we having this meeting? For years, people have been complaining on the neighborhood Facebook group about the crime in Beacon Hill and like, oh, what's happening to our neighborhood? I personally didn't think it was that bad. Yes, we had some crime. I didn't think it was excessive. And I say that as someone who's had his house burglarized. Well, I've experienced myself. But that is changing. There has been a significant increase. And with that in mind, the board felt it was time to address this as a neighborhood. In particular, to take it beyond speaking amongst ourselves, but to bring our concerns to the attention of city leaders. Those concerns being drugs, property crimes, gunfire, homeless encampments and squatting, and speeding and pedestrian safety. Drugs probably get talked about less than some of these, but I feel that they're the underlying cause of a lot of the other problems. Something that's not talked about on Facebook much are the drug houses in the neighborhood. For example, on West Gramercy, here at Magnolia and Hollywood, and certainly there's others that we haven't heard about yet. Having that presence contributes to violence, property crimes, trespassing, fires. We had one instance of a fire from a meth lab, and preying on the homeless. It also causes fear and intimidation, which is probably why we don't hear about it much on Facebook group. One item that does get a great deal of attention is property crimes. It has affected the highest number of people in the neighborhood. This will be awkward. Double fist. Is that all? Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to go back and let's see. All right. No doubt there are people here who have experienced property crimes themselves, and some of you I know have had it more than once. It's ranges from port theft to car break-ins, actual parts taken off of cars, to property, home and property invasion. It has become relentless. It's happening both day and night, and it seems like not a day goes by that there isn't another report of someone else getting hit. It's been, and it's not just random, it's organized. We have identified people who are working together. Basically, it's their business now. And we know that some of the houses they're working at, I think they're using as shops. Goods are sold in antique stores, pawn shops, and more than ever online, where some of our residents have been able to find and identify their stolen items, and occasionally get them back. We're going to take a look at one of these particular individuals in action. When I see stuff like this, I'm a little confused. I'm confused why to go that much effort. Why not just actually have a job and then get involved with work life? And we'll go see him at home too. Home of the sorts. Another high-profile problem is gunfire. We have had this running joke, sort of gallows humor joke in the neighborhood, is that gunshots are fireworks. But we don't make that joke quite as much anymore because it happens so often we're pretty good at identifying it now. Several times a week, sometimes it seems almost nightly. It's just kind of surprising how often it happens anymore. Homes have been hit. People have found spent shells in their homes. There's signs of them. And part of what's frustrating about this is that it's so mysterious. We're not really sure what's the motivator here. Is it just reckless gun use? Is it actually targeted violence? We just hear it nearby and we don't know really what's going on. And I think it's all too clear from the instance of last week that even if you're not targeted, it can still be deadly for you. This issue of homelessness is a divisive one in the neighborhood. For some people, it's a menace and even considered to be a source of much more crime. For others, this attitude is callous and degrading to people in dire straits. But whatever your stance, it's difficult to argue that homeless encampments are not a good situation for anyone, either for the people occupying them or the people living nearby. Inevitably, it leads to trash and debris and human waste in public areas. And there's the knock-on effect of encouraging illegal dumping by other people. We've also had fires and loss of buildings because of fires set by squatters. So whether they're the source of the problem or being exploited, there is a connection to theft and drug activity. This last item is really in a different category because it's not normally thought of as criminal behavior. But the problem of speeding and reckless driving is a threat to the health and safety of our residents. As we get more new residents moving in, we've seen an increase of pedestrians, walking dogs, pushing strollers, etc. The city emphasizes safe streets, but the barriers to residents who wish to achieve that seem insurmountable. There was a resident who's had to spend a multi-year campaign just to get some sidewalks or some stop signs put in to slow the speeding on this street. So, what next? What we're doing next as an association is throwing some requests out of some items we think might be helpful if we could get some information on this. So the first is improved integration and communication between relevant city staff, such as the safe officers, code, regular patrol, homeless outreach, vacant buildings, dangerous premises, and so on. Both so that they can work together more effectively, and for us to have a better understanding of functional integration. One suggestion thrown out was possibly a monthly breakfast between some of these staff members and us. 2, improved data flow to the safe officer. Our understanding, possibly wrong, is that the safe officer gets no real-time reporting. The onus is on us to report crimes as they happen, so he's able to see the patterns, which means double reporting both to him and to the SAPD. 3, guidance that we could share with the community that explains good information for reporting crimes. What is most helpful? What is not helpful? Video, pictures, timestamps. Do we make the report to 911 or to 311? How should we do this? 4, information on how we can compel arrests and or prosecutions. A lot of that's driven by the situation with the rings we talked about and the House on Summit. This individual has been known for years and been a problem actor for years, and some progress has been made just recently, but it was very frustrating that it seemed to go on and little happens, and like, what do we need to do to push those sort of things ahead? And finally, details about steps taken toward proactive policing. Policing by its nature is mostly reactive, can't do much until something happens and you respond to it, but is there any chance of steps taken ahead of time? Some sort of sting that would perhaps stop the sort of people we're talking about and catch them in the act. All right, I'm going to stop you out right now and turn it over, let you decide. Chief McManus or Councilman, who would like to go first?
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you, Chief, for letting me hop in here. It is great to see so many people who turned out today. It's also a sign that that this is a problem and our community is concerned. And I share your concern. I know the Chief and I have had several phone calls and meetings recently. We've got another one coming up next week. And I appreciate very much that presentation. It was extremely thorough. I think that's the most thorough presentation I've seen from the community on concerns about public safety. One thing I would add to that is mental health. And I would put that before drugs. Because mental health problems often end up leading to the drug use. And I will tell you that the city is investing more in mental health in our community than they ever have before. We have a $26 million plan for comprehensive support for mental health. Now, that's great that we're spending more on that than before. However, we've always been underfunded for mental health, and the needs are more than they've ever been in the past. Because of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of issues exacerbated, and we're not just seeing it here. We're seeing violence rise at the national level, and we're seeing it rise here. And it's always more concerning, obviously when it hits home. And I know what it's like to hit home to some extent, because I think it was either 2 or 3 weekends ago, I woke up at 12:20 in the morning and I heard 13 gunshots. And I called 911, and that's one of the things that you asked about is detailed guidance about good information for reporting crimes. Report everything. Report everything. I talk to some people who feel like they have high crime in their neighborhoods, and they say, well, we don't want to bother the police officers with the petty stuff. A lot of this ends up being connected to some of the same people, and if you report it, I need more data as a policymaker to be able to go to the city and make the case that we need to put more resources towards addressing this, and whatever they are. So please report everything. And we have a problem also with some people you saw a lot of social media posts. Some people post it on social media, but they don't call SAPD. They don't call 911, or they don't call 311 or a non-emergency number. You need to do both, because the police need to know about it first. They need to know about it right away so they can address it right away if necessary. So back to hitting home, I woke up to those gunshots. The very next morning, I got a text message from a neighbor. And they said, hey, we found this bullet casing right outside of your house. And then I went out there and I started looking for bullet casings, and I found one, and a police officer showed up, right? I called it in, and a police officer showed up right away, and I was shocked at how quickly that police officer showed up. And it was because he wasn't showing up for my call, he was showing up from another neighbor's call for bullet casings that they had found. And between me and all of my neighbors, we found all 13 bullet casings, on the street that my house is next to. Somebody was driving up the street, firing off shots. And I know all of you, I'm sure, have woken up in the middle of the night hearing gunshots. And all of you have been concerned about it. And the concern that we all share is something that just happened this last week, where there was a shootout and a stray bullet hit an innocent man while he was sitting in his living room, right? And so that's the nightmare that so many of us are worried about, right? Because the police chief will tell you, Chief McManus will tell you that a lot of times a lot of these crimes are, and he's right, associated with risky behavior. These are drug deals going down. It's gang activity. Or maybe it's domestic violence. And so if you're not involved in any of these things, then you're largely insulated. But those things can still affect us, and we just saw it this week. So I share your concern, and I want to say also in your presentation you mentioned homelessness. Homelessness is not a crime. There are people who have fallen on bad times. There are people who have severe mental health issues. They're never going to be able to hold a job. They're never going to be able to feed themselves. They're never going to be able to house themselves. And the way we address that is through permanent supportive housing. It actually costs less to provide them with housing and wraparound services, with mental health services, with drug counseling services, and get them off the street. And there is a subset of these individuals with severe mental health issues. If you take 500 of them from here in our community in San Antonio, they're responsible for emergency services responses, for reaching out to them, whether it's a 911 call or any kind of being taken to the hospital for by an ambulance, anything to that effect, over 11,000 times a year from these 500 individuals. And these are often the individuals who end up maybe confronting somebody and, there's a screaming match, or maybe they're getting naked in public or something. These are the people with the severe mental health issues. And we address that through permanent supportive housing. But we have funding to do that. We've set aside $20 million from federal relief funds for COVID for that purpose already. And if you approve the bond on affordable housing, there's another $20 million there. But we need places to build it. Just recently, and this is a proven method for helping address homelessness. The city had some property and they tried to build this in a permanent supportive housing unit in 5 Points, and they said, no, not in my neighborhood. Well, if everybody says not in my neighborhood, where are we gonna do it? And we're not gonna make headway on this. So we need places to build this, first of all. I know that homelessness gets associated with crime, and the truth is, the lines are blurred, right? Because there are criminals who prey on the homeless. And there are criminals who try to use the homeless for crimes. And so there's just a lot, there are criminals, there are people who are homeless, and there's a lot of blur in between, there's a whole spectrum. So we are working on addressing that. In the short term, the other thing we're gonna do is, now that COVID numbers are starting to wane and it's gonna be safer for us to get together in person, we are going to be bringing some workshops to the neighborhoods. One is a homelessness 101 workshop. What are homeless people, what are the issues that they're dealing with? What are the resources available to them? How can you connect them to those resources? And the other is a workshop put on by the Center for Healthcare Services. If you encounter somebody who's having a mental health crisis, how do you respond as a first responder, the first person to interact with them? So I hope I covered a lot of those topics, and I'm gonna hand it off to the chief, and then we hope to hear from you all. Thank you. One is for the front of the room and one is for the back of the room. Maybe? I'm not sure.
Let me start out by saying this, that I am as frustrated as you and every other neighborhood association in this city that's about the repetitive crime, the gunshots, the homeless challenge, the drugs, all these things. I'm as concerned and frustrated as you are about it. I live in the city too. Matter of fact, for those of you who don't know where I live, I think everybody in the city does. I live like 2 minutes from here, just on the edge of Beacon Hill. There's a lot of topics that were mentioned in the opening presentation, and I want to try to address them without going all over the place. So let me talk about the 2 incidents that happened here. Councilman mentioned one of them. Does everybody understand or know what happened with the barricade situation over here last week?
Yeah.
So here's what happened. There were workmen refurbishing this house or doing something to a house. The guy who lived in the house next door came out with an AR-15 rifle and threatened the workmen, telling him or them, don't come near his property. So with that, they called the police. We showed up, surrounded the house. The guy eventually gave up. But he was mentally ill. I think it was his mom who said that he was bipolar and had some other issues as well. But we eventually got him to come out without anybody getting hurt. So that's what happened on the first one, something as simple as that. The question I ask you is, think in your mind, how do you stop that? How do you stop something like that from happening? Because when the police show up in force with SWAT and negotiators, it's scary, especially if you don't know what the heck's going on. That's number one. Number two, up at Blanco and Mariposa, I watched the video after this happened. I was on scene and watched the video that was taken in the convenience store. So a green Suburban comes down Blanco slowly, turns right on Mariposa and circles through the gas station and does this about 3 times. The last time he does it, he pulls onto Mariposa and he parks right at the edge of the gas station, just within the view of the camera, fortunately for us. So he sits there for a few minutes, and the guy walks up, guy in a red shirt and khaki pants, khaki shorts. He walks up to the car, to the front passenger door, and he's talking to the guy in the seat. And they're getting ready to make some kind of exchange. I don't know whether they're selling guns or drugs. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably drugs. There were 5 people in the Suburban. Anybody want to take a guess how old they were? 15 and 16 years old. As soon as this deal, whatever it is getting ready to go down, a guy from the back seat, there were 5 people in the car, in the Suburban. Guy in the back seat gets out, gun in his right hand. He takes a step or two toward the guy at the front passenger window, and then that's when the action starts. The guy that got out of the car, he gets killed while the guy's standing there talking in the window. He shoots a second guy in the car, and then the third bullet goes across the street and kills a senior citizen sitting in his living room watching TV. We charged all 5, well, all 4, because the one guy's dead. We charged all 4 of them with capital murder. The frustrating question I ask myself is, how do you stop that? How do you prevent that from happening? How do you change behavior to stop people from doing stuff like that? I don't know the answer to it. I mean, it goes way back with a lot of social and economic issues, but that's part of my frustration. So, let me talk about the homeless challenge. Beacon Hills, everybody know where Salinas here? He almost choked on his coffee. Ernest is the president of Delview. And I would say, Ernest, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have somewhat of a success story about the homeless. And the council member knows about this as well. And I'm going to talk about him. The former council member allowed the homeless to camp in the back and all around his field office up there on Vance Jackson. It was a mess. It was a mess forever. And despite our attempts to clean that up and to get assistance for the homeless, there was a lot of pushback, a lot of resistance. And the drug dealing continued, and the sex in the parking lot continued, and the drinking continued, and the hanging out continued, and it was a mess. Finally, the election occurred. And it took us 3 weeks, a month, and it was gone, because we were allowed to do our jobs. The challenging part with the homeless, the city spends millions, tens of millions of dollars to provide services and shelter for the homeless. Millions. Starting with the Haven. We rent hotels. Many of the homeless, as you well know, don't want those services. Matter of fact, it's in the 90% range that don't accept them. They don't want, you could give them a room at a 5-star hotel, and they wouldn't take it for free. And they wouldn't take it. Panhandlers. You see panhandlers all over the city. You tell them to move on, they go when they see you, and when you take it off, they come right back. You give them a ticket, they crumble that ticket up, throw it away. You arrest them, take them down to the mag's office, they spend a couple hours before they'll see the magistrate. Magistrate will release them for time served. You can't put them in jail, you can't make them pay a fine. There is no jail time for a Class C misdemeanor or a city ordinance violation. No jail time, can't make them pay a fine. So where's the teeth? How do we make them stop doing that? How do we deter them from doing that? There's no disincentive other than getting taken off the street for a few hours and go down to take it down to the mag's office, and that's it. We even take their money sometimes and put it on the property book, in the property room. The money that they've panhandled uses it as evidence. That's the biggest inconvenience for them. So that's the homeless challenge. We used to try to enforce it away, keep them moving, keep them moving, keep them moving, don't provide services, just kick them out of the way. We stopped doing that a long time ago. When they saw us coming, they'd run. When they see us coming now, they sit there and wait for us to hear what we're gonna say. We offer the services. Under the highways, under the freeways, that's all TxDOT property. We move them out anyway. TxDOT usually helps us, but we move them out anyway. And that's thanks to the safe officers here. They work that, I don't know, once a week, once every 2 weeks, you guys work that. So we don't ignore the homeless challenge, nor does the city. Drugs. The writing on the wall, in my opinion, is that there are certain drugs that will eventually be legalized. Would anyone disagree with that? We arrest people for drugs, and what happens to them after that? But we arrest them. There are policies where a certain amount of drugs, under a certain amount of drugs, they're not prosecuted. They're dismissed. They're dismissed outright. And yet you still have people being killed over marijuana, over cocaine, over meth. Talking about challenges here. So what do we do with those people? We keep arresting them. And what do? They keep doing what they do. Guns. You know, I'm not opposed to people having guns. I'm not a gun person, but I'm not a gun nut, if I can phrase it that way. Everybody was concerned that when the governor signed the new law allowing constitutional carry, you don't have to get a CHL anymore, that it was going to create a lot of problems. I think I'm probably the only police officer around that isn't really concerned about that. Because think about it. The people with the CHLs, the people that are carrying legally, are not out there shooting people. It's criminals that are doing that. It's people that are not supposed to be having guns doing that. Case in point, Mariposa and Blanco, 15, 16-year-old kids. Oh, and after the shooting stopped, the guy who initially walked up to the Suburban, he comes sprinting around the corner, and who comes chasing after him but another guy from the car with a gun in his hand. But it's not your legal gun carriers that are causing these problems. It's the ones that aren't supposed to be carrying them. Risky behavior. There are exceptions to this. Don't get me wrong. I got chastised by one group a few years ago for saying this because someone he knew was the victim of a violent crime and they weren't involved in it somehow. They weren't engaged in risky behavior. So I say that there are exceptions to this. But if you're in a gang, any gang members in here? If you're in a gang, if you're soliciting prostitution, if you're buying prostitution on the street, if you're buying or selling drugs on the street, even online, you are engaging in risky behavior. If you are out at 2 o'clock in the morning, drunk at the bar, trying to pick somebody up. Example, the shooting on North St. Mary's, the murder on North St. Mary's a couple weeks ago. 2:15 in the morning, guy sitting on this girl. The boyfriend or the person she was with took issue with it, walked over to his car, got his gun, and killed him. How do you stop that? You got to put a cop on every corner? That ain't happening. There's just not enough of them. But how do you stop, how do you change that kind of behavior? If you are involved in risky behavior, it's eventually going to catch up to you one way or the other. Either it's going to catch up to you on the street, was going to catch up to you in the courtroom. But that is what drives the majority of the violent crime in this city. Many of the victims are connected somehow to the perpetrator. They don't necessarily know them personally, but there's some connection. You got a house on your block where there's constant drive-bys or shooting into the house. There's somebody in that house that they're looking for, that they want, hurt or dead. Every time. Or it's just a case of a mistaken address, but every time. People don't just drive by a house repeatedly and just shoot at the house. There's something going on in that house. Every time. A few years ago, cite and release was the big push. Everybody know what cite and release is? So there are, let's say, 7 offenses, drugs being one of them, theft, help me out, guys, what's just some of the other ones?
Driver without a license.
Yeah, riding without a license. There's several.
Drugs.
Yeah, drugs and so-called minor offenses that if, I'll give you an example. If someone comes into Chris Madrid's and orders $150 worth of hamburgers with a group of people, 150, they go to leave, they get the bill, it's $150, $200, and they walk out on the check. You'd think that they would be arrested, right? Officer shows up, writes them a ticket, and they're good to go. Do you think Chris Madrid is pissed off? Somebody steals a valuable plant vase off of your porch, or a lounge chair off of your porch. See the guy walking away with it, you call the police, we happen to be around the corner, we catch up to him, write him a ticket, let him walk. Does that make you feel good? So, that has become an issue. It's become an issue for me. But there are a lot of groups out there, a lot of folks who are pushing cite and release. And the only reason I agreed to cite and release years ago was I insisted that officers have discretion whether to write the ticket or whether to arrest them. And there's a push right now to take away police officer discretion when it comes to cite and release. And I have absolutely dug my heels in on it. But that wave keeps coming. It keeps coming. The folks are lobbying council members to try to pass an ordinance to remove discretion, which, by the way, is against the law to remove police officer discretion. They can't do that, but they continue to try to do it anyway. But that's an issue for me. Because again, there seems to be more concern about the perpetrator than the victim. In a whole lot of things, a whole lot of ways. Let me talk a little bit about some good news. So, last year we ended the year with a decrease in every violent crime category except for murders. We had 29 murders. Was it 129 a year before? 130 murders in 2020. 2021, we had 160. Again, primarily due to risky behavior, family violence, mental illness, murder-suicide. On Sunday, we had a murder-suicide up in the Prue area. No, I'm sorry, we didn't have a murder-suicide. We had a double murder. A young man sitting on his porch, his parents came to visit him, and guess what he did? He shot them both with an AR-15, killed both of them. He was mentally ill. So, at the beginning of the year, we broke the city down into little quadrants, or hotspot areas, small hotspot areas. And we identify the ones with most of the crime. And it's all over the city, there's no concentration anywhere. It's all over the city. And we have extra patrols. We're looking at this holistically. We're doing extra patrols. We're concentrating on certain buildings, certain addresses. Do you know where most of the crime comes from in the city, just generally speaking? Anybody want to guess? Where? It's all over, but where all over? Anybody want to take a guess?
On the ranch.
No, it's apartment building, apartment complexes. Apartment complexes all over the city. And a lot of these apartment complexes, they're Section 8, which is their subsidized housing.
The poor people.
What's that?
The poor people.
Whatever you want to call them,
That's fortunate.
but subsidized housing. That's where most of the crime problems are in the city. The consistent problem addresses where we get most of our calls and most of the crime occurs. So we are focusing on those addresses and those hotspot areas with patrol resources to include SWAT being out there on patrol, safe, and then we're working with the owners of those apartment complexes, the managers of those apartment complexes, to try to get them to change certain things. The design. There might be a lack of lighting. There might be some hedges blocking somewhere the view where these folks hang out and get into trouble or do drugs or deal drugs. So I think I'm going to get the hook here on it.
We're just getting short on time, so I want to get the Q&A when you get a chance.
Okay. So anyway, we are working that crime plan, and we've just hired 2 criminologists to work the data with us and help us with a revised crime plan for the going through this year. So that was actually the last topic I wanted to address with you. I will answer questions about big picture things. If you have a individual concern about an address or a particular activity in your neighborhood, I would ask that you address that to the safe officers when I'm finished here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Do you publish information about hotspots?
We just started doing that, so no, we haven't done that yet, but there's a plethora of information on our website about crime, you name it and it's there. So,
Including locations?
was that?
Including locations?
Yes.
Because what I've seen is more generic, more neighborhood rather than addresses.
Rather than addresses?
Yes.
Depending upon what the offense is, we may, if it's sexual assault, we won't put an address up there, but it's all on there. And if you have questions about it, you can, your friend will give you his number here before you leave, as will I, and you can just make that call in my office. Joe Frank works in my office. Yes, ma'am.
I was at one of these meetings when, in the community center in Dora, that you did a crime meeting with the neighborhood once. And there was brought up that part of the problem is that the jails want to release people because they don't want to overcrowd the jails, and the judges do not want to increase their load, judicial load, so that's why a lot of this is coming back on the streets to victimize.
I would say get out and vote.
Thank you, Rose.
That's it.
Way back here, yes, ma'am. Let me give you this.
You didn't answer?
So my question is on reporting crime. We had an issue where someone came onto our porch, tried to steal furniture, were successful. I called 207 SAPD, made a report. They asked me if I had trespassing signs in front of my house, which I don't. They didn't, they do now. They gave me a report number, and that was the end of that. That happened at 9 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock at night, I get a phone call from a police officer asking if I want to make a report. Told them I made a report, gave them the report number, and they said, oh no, that's not a report. So that's why we're calling you back. I'm confused on who we're supposed to call and what the process is.
I'm confused too. You Yeah, you did exactly the right thing. You call us 207 SAPD, and they'll make the report, they'll give you a report number. I don't know who called you back. If you have a report number, a report was made. So, emergency, let me tell you real quick. Calls are put out to the officers in order of priority. There's seven, maybe 8 priorities. Of course, the top priorities are, assaults and things like that. And they work their way down to a theft or something like that, all the way to the bottom of the priority list. But they're put out according to that. When you call, let's say there's somebody that's on your porch and he's trying to break in your home, or in the back of your house trying to break in your home, and you call the dispatcher, you call dispatch and you say, hey, I've got somebody on my porch and I'm a little worried, he's causing a disturbance. If you don't report it right, then you're not going to get the kind of response that you're looking for. If you've got somebody breaking into your home, I got somebody breaking into my home right now and I am scared and da-da-da-da. If you've got someone in your home, that there's some kind of disturbance in your home, and maybe somebody just assaulted one of your family members, and it's ongoing, and you just say, hey, there's a disturbance in my home, and we got an argument going on, and you forget to mention or don't mention that there's been an assault. They ain't coming right away. It gets put on in that queue. So you've got to report precisely what's happening. If you're afraid, if you're concerned, you've got to say that, and then you get the proper response. But that happens all the time. People call up and they're angry because they didn't get the right response, and we go and listen to the tape. Everything's recorded down there. We go listen to the tape, and there's no sense of urgency that was reported. And we have to go back and say, hey, this is the way you got to do it. And they say, sometimes they still don't believe. We'll play the recording for them. So you've got to say the right thing, the accurate thing when you're reporting something to the police. Yes, sir.
Chief, do you have property crime cases right now that have sufficient evidence that you're submitting to the DA and the DA's picking them back? If so, what are they telling you?
Let me hear this.
So my question is, do you have cases with sufficient evidence, whether it be property crime or whatever, that's going to the DA and the DA is not picking them up and kicking them back? If so, what are they telling you as to why they're rejecting them?
I try to do these meetings without dropping anyone in the grease, because I kind of get in trouble for that
Drop them in the grease.
when I do it. But I'll just say this: if there are cases that are presented to the district attorney when the district attorney's office when arrest is made, some of them are dismissed, some of them aren't. And that's all I'll say. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say before this meeting ends, I would like to say a quick thank you to Daniel and Kim for putting this together and their time. And also, Chief, before we end, I would like to say, these meetings have happened around communities and associations before the end of time, and they go on, and the communication, it seems once the meeting ends, the communication stops. Is there any way this communication can continue with our association and it doesn't stop? Because I would love to see this communication going on.
Absolutely.
I want to see results, that's all.
Absolutely. And here's a big thing for me. Here's a big thing for me. So if you give me or anyone in my department present us with an issue, a concern, and it needs an investigation, we will investigate that and follow back up with you personally.
Well, we have one case we know about, and it's been going on for years, and there still seems to be no results in that one
face, and it's so frustrating. I never been person, and that was 5 years ago.
But you're talking about an address, right? And drugs,
That was our neighborhood people,
a neighborhood what?
our neighborhood people.
Thief? Okay. So,
It's frustrating, both in and out.
so the neighborhood thief has been at it for 5 years and it's still there. And we haven't been able to do anything about it. And I'll tell you, if we haven't done anything about it, it's because we don't have the evidence or the.
You do.
Chief, I think this goes back to the DA thing. You guys have arrested a case that submitted to the DA, and I think the DA is not taking it up.
You know, there's a lot of people, the majority of the people that we arrest have criminal records. There's not a whole lot of people that we arrest that don't. And, you know, I mean, it starts most of the time starts at a young age and continues. Yeah, and if you call us, let me give you, Joe Frank, give me your number.
My number is 210-289-1555. That's my mobile number. If I don't answer, I'm calling the meeting, please feel free to text and I will follow up. Thank you.
Sir, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are.
Yeah. His name is Joe Frank Picasso. His office is right next to mine. And I'm making this up right now, he's my constituent services guy. That's not what his title is, but that's primarily what he does, working with council. So if you get him information, I can assure you, and you can hold me accountable, we will get back to you with a follow-up. We'll assign it, it'll be investigated, it'll come back to us, and we'll get back to you. That I can promise you, that I commit. Yes, ma'am. Please do.
First of all, thank you all for being here today. There is a lot of confusion, so when something does happen in our neighborhood, it's who do we call? Is it possible, working with the councilman's office, with our safe officers, to get maybe a list that we can put in our newsletter, so we're calling the right people and we're getting the correct response?
We'll get you that information. If you've got a crime or some threat that's about to happen to you, you call police. If it's an emergency, you call 911. If not, you call 207 SAPD. If you've got an issue with, I don't know, something broken, pipe in the street or something, call 311.
Yeah.
But if you need a response, call the police. If you need a report, call the police. And we don't care if we have to tell you to call another number or not. We'd rather you err on the side of caution and give us a call. And I want to give you my number, not that I think you'll need it, but to show good faith that I'm involved in this with you. 210-207-7360. That's my direct line. And I'll tell you what, I'll go even a step further. Take this number down. 210-900-5990. Guess what that is? That's my cell number.
Good.
That's my commitment to you.
This woman had her hand up earlier.
What else can we do as the residents to help keep our neighborhood safe?
You know, I know this may ring hollow, but keep calling us. If you don't call and the issue continues, you get frustrated, it starts to boil, you know, and then when you finally do call us, you know, we're at the end of, you know, we're getting these, you know.
But property, I mean, what else can we do to protect our property, to protect our family?
You know, property crime.
Proactive.
Property crime is a crime of opportunity. You know, and it's unfortunate you got to chain down all your belongings that you want to leave outside. But, you know, just like you leave something in your car, it's going to get stolen. Especially if you go to some of these commercial lots or one of the malls, it's going to get stolen. Secure your house. Don't leave your house unsecured, especially the first floor. You know, open your windows upstairs, but don't leave them open downstairs. Cameras on your house, I found cameras are invaluable. If something happens, I mean, if you can, you know, you're up to doing that. But I think just being vigilant and staying together and staying in touch with us. You know, even if crime doesn't go down, people who have a good working relationship with their police officers feel safer.
Yes.
You've got that connection,
Yes.
and you've got that person at your disposal.
Yes.
And these guys, they'll give you their cell numbers, and all you got to do is call them.
Officer Maciel has been amazing, actually. We've had I know councilwoman person, but you know what we need to do is we have porches. The reason we've insisted on our NCT having front porches is be out there, get to know your neighbors. You know, when we got stuff stolen, there was a neighbor who texted me and said, I think they're selling it at the antique store. Is that yours? And I was able to go down there, and I think eyes on the street, neighbors who know each other, neighbors who are out on their porches walking their dogs, just keep watch. There's a reason why we know where the hot spots are. Because a lot of us are walking and we see it and we report it to each other, and we also report it to the police. So neighborhoods, knowing each other, and urban neighborhoods are great for that. We're very walkable. Well, we've got stop signs that help us walk on our streets. That, you know, this is part of what makes a place like this safe. Yeah.
And you know, I was a little disappointed that we didn't want to block it all today. More disappointed in the weather that we didn't want to walk in this cold. But I was a little disappointed that we didn't want to walk in it. And when you want to do that, please let me know. Please let me know, and we can look at the problem areas together.
We actually have 1 minute to clear the room. But I think I can stay.
Actually, I think we have a little more time. Is that right? We begged for more time.
Oh, great, okay.
11:15.
Oh, wonderful.
So, unless there's any more big picture questions, yes, ma'am.
So I'm a big fan of the SAFE program, and as Cynthia said, we have a wonderful SAFE officer right now. I'm curious, do they have other responsibilities outside of SAFE, or are they dedicated to us? And if not, can we have them all the time, because it's a really great program.
99% of the time, they're dedicated to you. Occasionally, when there's an emergency, you know, we may deploy them somewhere else, but that happens pretty rarely. When's the last time you got assigned to do something else?
The ice plan. Yeah, the ice plan, yes.
Was that?
During the ice plan.
Yeah, so when the ice plan, when it gets icy, they'll be out on the road, monitoring the highways to see if they ice up. But other than that, I mean, not really. They stay with you. So, yes, sir.
How does the SAFE officer work with the patrol officer, and do they get the same information? Can they get the same information when it's called in? So you've got two eyes on it, and the SAFE officer knows what the patrol officer is doing, and vice versa. And I'll also add Parks Police, because Park runs through here, and they each have their jurisdictions, and code compliance, because code compliance is involved in a lot of these things.
I'm going to let the SAFE officer answer that.
Oh, yes, we have definitely good collaboration, of course, with the patrol officer, which is Officer McManus, I think most of y'all know. So he and I communicate. We have each other's cell numbers, so if there's some concern, we'll let each other know. Ruby Luna, the code officer, we probably should have invited her. I also have her number, so we communicate quite frequently. In fact, I was talking to her yesterday here in Beacon Hill.
I'm speaking about technology. If somebody calls in a 911 in Beacon Hill, doesn't it? Don't we want it to go to the SAFE office?
They're on the same radio channel. So if they're not engaged in something that's got them occupied.
We're not calling the radio channel. We're calling the dispatch.
Yeah, the dispatch is putting it out on the radio.
To both of them.
To everyone. Everyone who's got the radio on is hearing that. So if you're a SAFE officer and everybody else in this room is patrol, you're all on the same radio channel, including you. So whatever goes out to them, you're hearing it as well. Yeah.
ask our safe officer, can you give us an update on 1045 West Summit? Because I know a lot of people here are concerned about that.
Can I,
Ongoing issue that you're.
can I get this gentleman first? He has his
Oh,
hand
sure,
up,
sorry.
I'm missing him.
I actually had a two-part question, but it was already asked. But the second part is for the councilman. How come, how much of the COVID money goes to the police? For their services, for their resources? Because that's going to help us if they have the resources.
So I think that's a completely separate issue. Like, I don't believe any COVID, I don't know, Chief, do you know of any? I don't know of any COVID money going to them. The COVID money it's federal money that comes with certain restrictions. And so, the city negotiates with Presentaion Police Officers Association through a collective bargaining agreement, and we're in negotiations on a regular basis right now with them on what that looks like. But Chief, I don't believe any of the ARPA funds have gone to SAPD, have they?
I think they went to pay back some overtime and stuff.
There were added expenses because of overtime during the pandemic, and so they went to pay that to cover those expenses. That's correct. Thank you. Other questions?
Hello, everybody. I'm Detective Hernandez. I've been with the department for 27 years. I work with the Central Property Crimes Unit. And the question that you were asking, ma'am,
Yes.
with Summit, so that individual was arrested a couple times already. He bonds out. We've towed his vehicle before. He takes it out. Apparently the vehicle is not working at this time right now, but we have 2 detectives that are currently working on other cases against this individual. Like I said, they put out a warrant for his arrest, he got arrested, and there's another case that has been filed against him. There's others that they're working on, but they just need a little bit more evidence against them. So sometimes, people come in and do these thefts, they're all covered up, especially because of COVID, sometimes we can't identify the individual. He lawyers up really, really quick, so that kind of stops us from continuing the interview with this individual. But Detective Grandon and Detective Belcher are actively working these cases. We sometimes get bits and pieces of it as well to be able to present it to you or to give y'all information about this. One thing is, if you see something, say something, and like the chief said, we all need to be involved in the community and with us as the police officers. Safe officers are great because they give us information, we give them information, and they go out and they take care of, if they got to put somebody in jail because we put out a warrant for their arrest, they're awesome with that. So, is there another question about?
Yeah, well, I'm curious because we all know he's been stealing from all the neighborhoods, not the
Right.
showers, so we're all concerned. But my other question is, if you can't get him, catch him in the crime, what do you do when he's in possession of the property day in, day out, day in? Not just with him, but others, because
Right.
a lot of
So-
criminals do that.
Yes, ma'am. So with property, this is very important. Serial numbers, pictures. If there's a piece of property that doesn't have serial numbers, put your marking on it somewhere, where it can be hidden. I guess if somebody steals it, we can be able to identify that property. A lot of times, thieves, what they do, they'll go and pawn all this property in these pawn shops. We have a database that we look for that stuff in the pawn shops by serial number, sometimes by the description. It's very hard sometimes if it's just a description, so we'll get tons and tons of property, But serial numbers are very, very important. Please write down your serial numbers, even take photos of your property, please. Yes, ma'am.
So if you find someone who's buying property from these guys, and that was the case when they stole stuff from us, like it was a local antique store, is there any charges brought against them?
Okay, so we recently had district attorney's assistants that came over to our office and actually elaborated about that. Hey, this person had this piece of stolen property, but they're saying they bought it from, somebody, or they bought it from a yard sale. So they were like, they will not charge that person for that. Now, let's just say if the death occurred, 10 minutes ago, and we kind of put everything together, well, you know what? This person had to have been the person who stole the property. Yes, we are going to charge that person. Once it goes up to the DA and whatever happens up there, that's out of our control. Okay, so what I did, I went ahead and brought some complaint packets. If you were a victim of a property crime, you come pick one up, so you can fill this out. Also with information to our office as well. Yes, ma'am?
I was just gonna ask, who's the Beacon Hill Safe Officer, because a lot of people say they don't know who it is.
Beacon Hill Safe
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're running short on time, maybe last couple of questions, anything at all? Ready? My wife wanted me to verify, I find myself calling police almost every night regarding gunshots. So I called 207. Is that the correct number to call? I mean, when do we call 911?
If you see somebody laying on the ground, injured, somebody, bullets are hitting your house, call 911. But if you're just hearing,
Okay, I've been in the neighborhood 17 years. I've been in the neighborhood 17 years and it's gotten a lot worse, where it's nightly. Before I leave this meeting, I just wanted to let you know, officer, we have a major speeding problem in the neighborhood. It's something I've worked on for a long time. I live on the corner of Magnolia, Michigan, and there's cars sometimes going by my house 70 miles an hour. I'm the one who fought for stop signs. There's only two, though. Between Woodlawn and between Hildebrand, there are now 3 stop signs. And right now, I find people just blowing through them. And it's adults. It's not kids. I got flipped off by a 50-something-year-old the other day because I told him to slow down. He ran right through the stop sign. It's daily. My wife and I see it constantly out through our windows. And what can we expect, or what can we get from the police to slow people down? I don't understand it. The speed.
when we get traffic complaints, speeding, running stop signs, whatnot, we pass that along to, and Joe Frank took that location down. And what we do is we pass it along to the traffic unit, and the traffic unit puts it on a list, because the same complaints we're hearing here, we get all over the city. They go on a list, and traffic will hit all those specific locations for a certain period of time. And then they'll stay there for a certain period of time, and then they'll move on to the next one. And they'll rotate, go back to it, but that's how it works. So that location will go to traffic division, or traffic section, and we'll put, they'll eventually wind up over there. Okay?
I have one more, just to speak to that. I think it's not only about the police when it comes to speeding and stop signs. The city is so difficult for them to, I mean, they want to help cars get through, but they don't have any, even though we have this zero, plan to help residents in neighborhoods, it is impossible to get these guys to respond to us and to understand speeders. They don't want to put stop signs, they don't want to put traffic measures. And there's a lot they could do, but really a lot of this is on the city. Besides SAPD, this is about city policy and not caring in our neighborhoods if people are, they just want them to make sure they get through quickly. It's a residential area.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's not just you, it's on the city.
Let me say that, I don't know if you can say whether SAPD does this or not, but like sometimes when neighborhoods come to us and they say, hey, we want some speed bumps here, we go and we ask to put speed bumps there, and we're told no, the fire department won't let you, because that's a regular route that they use, and they don't want the fire trucks to have to slow down. So that's something I've encountered. We're always looking for ways. My office is told no by city staff on a lot of things. Sometimes we have to do a study, and you can count on our office to push back every chance we get to try and increase safety on this, because sometimes they'll say, well, we're gonna do a study, and then they put out one of those hoses that when every time you drive over, it logs that a car went by, or and maybe they do two at a certain distance apart, and they can tell how fast they were going, but they only put them out for 24 hours. And that's not enough for a study, right? Because maybe it's an off day, or maybe it rained that day, and so people aren't driving as fast, or there aren't as many cars going by. And so, we're pushing back against those things, and we will continue to do that. If you contact us and let us know which streets, which blocks you're most concerned about, we'll look into them and we'll see what we can do. On the petty theft, my office will work with your safe officer here, and we'll set up an event where they can come out and they can etch your vehicle windows, and they can engrave, a lot of your tools, your ladders, your lawnmowers, things like that are highly or just that are high targets, I guess, for this kind of petty crime. So we wrapping it up, so I hand it back to you.
Yeah, we're pushing a little along here. I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you to Chief McManus and Councilman Bravo. And thank you all for coming out too. Frankly, we've done, not this thing before, but other community meetings where there's a lot of complaining about a certain topic, and we do a meeting and 5 people show up. So I really appreciate you stepping up and responding to this. It's obviously it's not done. It's an ongoing thing. We're trying to keep this dialogue going. If you have any questions written down, you want us to pass on, Ms. Turner's in here, and we'll pass them on and try to get some responses to you. One quick note, I did get word that regarding marking property in case of theft, we can set up events where we can bring the property in, we can get it marked by the police and have a little protection there. Okay, might be a few snacks back there, meeting thing.
I just want to say